You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. We will be going live shortly. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
Shouts right field, stumbling start for Stewart. Astros a deep left field by Alvarez. He's homered in 4 straight games for the second time. He's homered in 4.
What is up, Mets fans? Happy Tuesday and welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. Mets off-season talk. We got a jam-packed show for you all today. We'll be talking about all things Mets, but with a little bit of a unique twist, especially in relation to the special guest that has taken some time out of his night to come and talk Mets baseball with us. Before we bring him up, I'm sure many of you all already know him. Was on my channel something about 8, maybe 9 months ago. So it was a little bit overdue to bring him back up on the channel and talk Mets prospects in particular, but also just this encompassing offseason. Before we get into it, please do hit those thumbs up buttons on this very stream. If you're on X watching this stream over there, come over to the YouTube, hit the link, join the chat, the live chat. I got a live chat poll for you all to answer as Mets fans, and we're going to keep it very interactive. If you have any questions, comments, continue to drop them in the live chat, and make sure you drop your questions for the guest on the channel in the live chat as well. I will pin them and we will get to them throughout the show. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I definitely appreciate everyone being here again. There's so much going on with the New York Mets right now. We're in the midst of the Juan Soto rumor sweepstakes era. We're going to try to shy away from the Juan Soto discussion primarily, but his name naturally is going to come up in terms of how he fits for the 2025 Mets and beyond. But we've got a lot of news to get into. We've heard some, news surrounding Luis Severino. We've heard news surrounding, the Manager of the Year award that, no surprise to anybody, Carlos Mendoza got stiffed on yet again. Another New York Met organization member that gets stiffed on one of these awards. Anyways, without further ado, let's bring our guest up.
Please join me in welcoming our special guest to the True Mets Talk podcast.
All right, we got special guest on the show, Ernest Dove. Ernest, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
Well, I was doing better a few hours ago when there was some prospects that I thought were going to be Rule 5 protected, but I'm dealing with the emotions the best that I can. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For those of you all who do not know Ernest, huge, just great insight presence on everything Mets minor leagues and the farm system. I know you covered the St. Lucie Mets as well, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to sort of plug your work. You can see here right next to us, this is Ernest's channel on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe, and his YouTube is going to be in the description down below, as well as some other links in terms of what he's got going on relating to the New York Mets and where you can find him. So kind of plug that in, Ernest.
Yeah, obviously, if you can, follow me on my YouTube page at the Mets Minor League Report. Also, you can try to check me out sometimes on print form at maxmets.blogspot.com. And also my guys, my shout out, all the guys at sportswireradio.org, SPORTZ. wireradio.org, all the guys out there, all kind of sports, everything from wrestling, baseball, football, you name it, it's all over the place. And that's some of the places I've been at and where you can find me on any given day outside of Twitter X and I guess Blue Sky, since everyone's kind of the sky's falling of sorts. So you could also possibly follow me on there if you want to search up my name.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you got a lot of things going on in terms of what you cover and what you talk about, so I definitely appreciate it. Listen, the state of this organization has flipped 180 since the last time that you were on my channel, and we got a lot of positive things to talk about. Obviously, it's going to be very heavily oriented around the prospects that you've seen come up through this organization, some names to look out for. So for those of you all watching at home, if you are wanting to get a little bit of a deeper dive to get to know some of the names that, have been added into this Mets farm system as of recent within the last couple of years at least, please do continue to pay attention. Again, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Ernest's channel, and check out those great links where you can find Ernest down below in the comment section and in the description. And drop any questions that you have for Ernest in the live chat as well. I'm sure we're going to get to them, do a little bit of a Q&A, and we'll just kind of go through them as this show goes on. But before we get into the prospect talk, we do have a couple of news points here. And naturally, when I brought you up, I was kind of fumbling around with the little backgrounds, but we're all set now. Technical difficulties on a Tuesday, nothing new here. Let's talk about the latest addition in Jose Siri. I dropped the video on my channel. This seemingly came out of the blue, at least for me, in terms of, knowing that the Mets had an obvious gap at center field, but just not knowing how they were going to sort of address it or pursue it, whether it's going to be externally, as they just showed all of us they were going to do, or internally with a guy like Tyrone Taylor and a guy that we'll talk about later in this stream in Drew Gilbert. Now that changes the ball game for a guy like Drew Gilbert with the addition of Siri. But what do you make of this move? Are you a fan of it? And for anyone that wants greater context in terms of some of the numbers, the defensive values, etc., I dropped the link that I made about Jose Siri and doing an instant reaction video in the description down below as well. But give me some of your thoughts and opinions on this move, Ernest. I'm curious.
I mean, it was definitely looking a little interesting of a move in and of itself. It looks like one of those, I guess, David Stearns type of moves. We've been seeing it really recent, even through the offseason. Some of these pen arm guys are like, they're getting these guys that look fringe-ish and they're getting major league deals. But we saw what he was doing, patching up the bullpen, which had some highs and lows. With a guy like Jose Siri, it looks like it dives into the other things. David Stearns and the new Mets under Cohen with the money and resources is all about analytics and metrics. And here we are going the additional Tyrone Taylor route with a Jose Siri, who possibly is even a notch above Taylor defensively and a notch above Harrison Bader. So, I mean, one of the immediate conclusions would be, okay, well, maybe he's just going to go ahead and replace Bader. Boom, boom, bam. That's the difference in the 26-man roster. If it's as quick and simple as that, do you see it as an upgrade? The speed is there. He has more power than Bader. He strikes out a ton, but the defensive kind of capabilities, is that something that the organization now, they've been hyping on? Although we could talk maybe about a Mark Vientos in the field, but I hear you got with Jose Siri, some kind of elite defender like this with some speed and pop. Maybe you accept the strikeouts, but if this is the kind of guy like a Bader batting ninth anyway, we may have a new part-time bench ninth hitter with speed and Gold Glove defense.
And that's exactly what I think it is. And I think that's a great synopsis of what this move truly is. It's a replacement for Harrison Bader with more upside than Harrison Bader gives you. I think the defensive drop-off, I mean, everyone knows how good Harrison Bader was defensively, but you look at some of the advanced metrics of Jose Siri and his defensive capabilities, especially in the outfield. I mean, above average arm, above average range, the speed, the pure sprint speed. I mean, his Savant page is just like, you look down at the Savant page on the defensive side of the ball, it's just like all red, all good. But again, the offense is what people who probably don't like this trade and don't like the name Jose Siri are going to point out with the high strikeout rate. I believe it was at around 35% in 2024, which is well above league average. It heavily contributed to him hitting 187, which is also just abysmal. And I know that batting average is a flawed stat. I understand that. But when you're batting 187, there's something amiss there, right? You can hide batting average somewhat, but you can't hide it to that effect, in my opinion, at least. So that's kind of what I view it as. And, in terms of the outfield, outlook for 2025. We'll get into that later into the stream, but you got to wonder, will this affect Starling Marte in terms of not playing the field or just being on this team in general? It's definitely going to affect a guy like Drew Gilbert, because if you have an outfield comprised of Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, you have the addition and the possibility of adding a fifth outfielder a la Juan Soto, as we all want it to be. And that leaves no room for a guy like bringing Jesse Winker back. And I think that ship has long sailed in general, unfortunately, because I did like Winker a lot. I was hoping for a reunion, but I think this pretty much puts the nail in the coffin in terms of that reunion happening. And also, just a guy like Drew Gilbert, who I was ready to make the move toward in terms of trying to see if he can make an immediate contribution out of spring training for the New York Mets. But it's looking like, and we'll talk about it here in just a second, so I don't want to overtake this Jose Siri signing by the Drew Gilbert talk, but it's looking like he'll start his season back in AAA if I had to guess. But again, the home run power is what you get. And 25 home runs for Jose Siri in 2023, 18 home runs last year and 130 games. If you are selling me that this guy's going to bat on an every other day basis, being a platoon guy with maybe a Tyrone Taylor, 8 or 9 in your order, with that type of power, I'm going to sign up for that all day long.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just about, how much does he play? Like with a Bader, by the way, while the Mets were basically having the best record in baseball for over 100 games, it got to a point where Bader quietly started to struggle a lot. And that's why we were seeing a lot more of Tyrone Taylor. So, by the way, Bader was probably hitting about 190 for a while towards the end of the year. It's a roster situation. The structure of it, it's okay. Your thoughts on Drew Gilbert? It's just one of those things where the more we see what's going on, even including the most recent news, who they're not protecting for the farm system. To me, a lot of this, what this says is that, again, the Mets are absolutely proving that they're going to be an all-in organization going forward. That's just how it is. I'm going to keep making excuses, I guess, but even for 2024, all that the dead money, like we're talking about dead money like it's football, but they had all the money, over $50 million, going to guys who didn't even play for the Mets this year. So it was kind of a weird season anyway in 2024, but now, going into this season, the Mets, as an all-in organization every single year going forward, a guy like Drew Gilbert is going to have to earn it, like the way Mark Vientos did. Mark Vientos, remember, he got demoted during the year, and he's basically a core player within a couple of months. This is the situation the Mets are now in. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be that easy, but I would absolutely, even if there is a Soto, healthy Marte, a guy like Gilbert, probably in the Mets organization mind in November, December, January, they want no thought of him showing up anywhere near the field on the 26-man opening day, because this kind of all-in organization like the Dodgers and these organizations are not looking for these kind of rookies to make an impact unless he hits like 400 in camp. That could be different, but that's why I'm okay with it. I see a guy like him, even a Jet Williams and a healthy Ronnie Mauricio. I don't care what they do in spring. They're probably going to AAA, because that's the type of playoff contending, title contending organization is going to have those guys sitting there rather than already being on the roster, because they're already getting beat out. That's how good the organization is trying to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a discussion that we have a 2025 outlook. Don't worry. I put the potential lineup together. I'll get your thoughts and opinions on it, but you're absolutely right, 100%. And you know what? This signing, and I mentioned it in my video, and the fact that I really do think this, like, we've seen this type of signing before from David Stearns. We've seen this already. We've seen it last offseason with Tyrone Taylor. You talk about a guy that's entering his prime in terms of being 29, 30 years old. Another guy that had below average, sort of meh offensive numbers with his previous organization, but had that upside. And you talk about a guy that also has multiple years of control left on his contract. This is, to a T, a mirror signing of Tyrone Taylor. I don't think a lot of Mets fans are talking about that quite enough. And I do apologize for those of y'all watching at home. If you see me coughing in the background, a little bit under the weather, I'm trying to pull through for you all. A little bit of a scratchy throat, but we make through here, especially with me yelling. And I'm sure the neighbors don't appreciate that yelling anyways. But shout out to everybody in the chat, though. Frank, Carlos O, Patrick, Stevie, Kendrick, Darren. Appreciate you all being here. Mike, I appreciate you all being here. Again, please hit those thumbs up buttons. Check out Ernest's work. And if you have any specific questions for Ernest, drop them in the live chat. We want to keep it as interactive as possible, and I will continue to star them. And I know that as comments come through, I'll inevitably miss some, but I'll try as best as I can to keep the conversation flowing and address a lot of questions. Okay, so this was the Jose Siri signing in a nutshell, just our brief thoughts and opinions. If you want to learn more, again, my instant reaction video is in the description down below. As soon as you're done watching this stream, go check that out. Let's talk about Luis Severino, because there was a little bit of a question mark surrounding Luis Severino in terms of, was he actually going to sign the qualifying offer? Well, today we learned that he was going to decline it. The third and final player to decline the QO from the New York Mets this offseason, the other players being Sean Manaea and Pete Alonso. And this is kind of an outlook of the situation surrounding Luis Severino and contributes to the discussion of whether you bring him back or not. You see under the qualifying offer that he declined, and the value that he would have gotten out of that qualifying offer would have been more guaranteed money up front. It would have been a safer bet up front. But he is betting on himself, and it's kind of hard to blame him for doing that when he just posted a season with the most amount of innings by far that he's ever pitched in since 2018 in his Yankees days, in an all-star season, a 3.91 ERA compared to a 6.0 plus ERA in 2023, and all the other metrics preceding that. And now we get a situation where we have external sites like Spotrac and their algorithms trying to calculate what Luis Severino's next deal is going to be, presumably a multi-year deal. Now, there's a lot of debates and conversations around the league and amongst Mets fans in terms of what is the best price point for Luis Severino before you have to consider walking away and filling his position, elsewhere in the rotation. If he's looking for 4 years, $14 million per, for a contract total valuation of $56 million, which is what Spotrac is predicting, I think that the Mets might have to look elsewhere. Maybe they go down the route of a Walker Buehler. I know it's risky. I know that, we both have our thoughts and opinions on that, but it'd be mimicking essentially the risk that you took with Luis Severino this past 2024 season. So what is your maximum value, or not even that? What do you just assess of the situation in terms of Luis Severino testing the market and declining this QO?
I mean, first and foremost, he absolutely needed to do it. Both him and Manaea, they didn't have the same type of seasons, but for Severino to break like 30 starts in a year, there's no way you should take a 1-year deal, regardless of it being more money. He might never make this kind of money again for the rest of his career. And I don't want to say that as a mean, negative person. I don't know, but for a guy like this, he had to do it because on the flip side, he absolutely deserves a multi-year deal. 4 years kind of sounds like a lot to me. And obviously we can't go the route of Cohen can afford everything. We know this. It's a moot point. Actually talking in baseball terms, roster construction terms, pitching arms falling off terms. I mean, if it was up to me, maybe if you want to go 2-3 years with some kind of, team options after that, sign me up. I loved having him, even for the OMG sign, which somewhat, they had to come up with different things and routines at this point, but he was kind of the guys in the clubhouse or in the dugout making it cool for that. I would love to see both of these guys back, but for the way pitching is these days, I loved what he did. I know you always end up paying guys for what they did almost more than actually what they're going to do. It is what it is, but 4 years sounds a little too much to me. If it's 2 or 3, please bring him back.
Whoops, sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Especially taking a look at the rotation, we'll take a look at in just a second, as well as the pitching prospects that a lot of people are kind of, tossing into the chat here as we'll kind of ease into that discussion, especially surrounding 2 names that, you mentioned over on your X timeline that you were going to kind of bring in the tissue, so to speak, on this stream if they didn't get added to the 40-man, which didn't happen. It's a no-doubter if you can get Luis Severino in a 2 to 3 year deal, maybe an opt-out after the second one, then you do that. But I think that I agree with your line of thinking, and that I think it's pretty well known around the league. It's just that you don't know how volatile of a career Luis Severino is going to have just because he had this type of success in 2024. This might be his realistically, only payday, only opportunity at a major payday, and he's going to try to cash in. I understand that there's a feel-good story. I understand that he loves pitching in New York, being a former Yankee and now maybe presumably a former Met. But at the end of the day, money talks. We're hearing that same notion with Juan Soto, and that's just the business at the end of the day. And you can't blame these players for prioritizing that whatsoever. So again, it would make no sense to leave upwards of $35 million on the table if this contract valuation holds up. So, I do want to see him back. But if we don't get him back, I understand. And I will wish Luis Severino the absolute best is kind of how I will put that. Okay, in relation to that, I know it's way too early. To be kind of even talking about this, but I kind of do as we head into the trade season, the free agency season, and talking about the Mets potentially prioritizing starting pitching outside of, a guy like a guy by the likes of Juan Soto. Hodai Senga, David Peterson, Paul Blackburn, Jose Butto, Tyler McGill. That's your starting rotation if the season were to end today. That's obviously not going to be the case starting in 2025. I mean, that's just simply not going to be the case. With the names on the right, in terms of the Mets pitching prospects, I want to open up this discussion for you to let out your heartfelt feelings about the Mets' decision not to add the number 15th ranked prospect, Dom Hamill, and the number 18th ranked prospect, Mike Vasil, onto the 40-man roster, because I dropped this short on my channel today. 6 p.m. today, Tuesday, was the deadline for teams around the league to sort of save their internal prospects from being Rule 5 draft eligible. And if you don't know when the Rule 5 draft is, I believe it's going to be sometime in December during the winter meetings in Dallas, where these Rule 5 eligible players are basically up for grabs via draft for teams around the league. Take me a little bit through your mindset in terms of why the Mets perhaps wouldn't add these guys onto the 40-man roster, knowing that they could depart the organization before the 2025 season. And yeah, let's just start there with that question.
I mean, I feel like there's a few different things that might be going on. First and foremost, it needs to definitely be brought up that, none of the guys on this list are, except for Santucci, no one else is a Stearns guy. None else is a Stearns pick, Stearns developed. I have to keep that in mind before I even start discussing any of the prospects at this point, because he has his own new resources, his own new analytics. I was even talking to some higher ups about things even in the last year or two in the drafts. They just were adding new resources that the organization didn't even have, that other teams were having an advantage over the Mets in the draft. It seemed kind of shocking to me, but it's been going on for some years. They didn't have certain resources that other organizations did. Now they do. Now, as far as Dom Hamill and Mike Vasil, as far as just talking about the season, rather than me be me, the prospect hugger, Hamill was just, the walk rate continues to be extremely high. It continued throughout the year. My concern with Dom Hamill, even going into the year, Dom Hamill was a guy who's like 6 innings, 1 run, 10 Ks, and then 3 1/3, 5 runs, 6 walks, and 6 Ks. It would, that's literally almost going to happen multiple times each per month. I was confused by the consistency of a guy who still has a high K rate, but there was not enough consistency for me. Mike Vasil, he was having struggle. Usually he would struggle a little bit with higher competition. He became like my anti-Mark Vientos of sorts, where Mark Vientos would get stronger. Sometimes Vasil struggles a little bit longer at the new levels, higher competition. But my concern with Vasil was the K rate just dropped in 2024. So when you try to evaluate guys, like you talk about the batting average at the early, batting average, no one really talks about. Pitching wise, it's always about ERA, doesn't matter. But K rate is still extremely important. And for Vasil's K rate, it went from pretty much over 9 every year to just gone in 1 year. Is that simply because of competition? I know AA to AAA, the baseballs are a little bit different, which for the love of God, I don't know why. But I don't think that's enough, especially when he got enough time. So if it was my opinion without true intel from the organization, I think Hamels command, Vasil's lowered K rate, I think those are certain things that it might be seen as a red flag of sorts. Or someone pointed out to me on Twitter real quick in a comment, and it makes sense. Like, well, technically on November 19, 2021, Hamel and Vasil both still are assets of the New York Mets organization. They may still possibly be getting traded before the Rule 5 because the only thing is they have to be protected by somebody. But maybe there's a team out there thinking, I would like to scoop one of them up. Maybe we're a little bit down on the totem pole. If it's one of those draft routines where they think someone's going to take them first, maybe they end up getting traded anyway. Because to me, why would you give up assets for absolutely nothing? It's my opinion, but again, no K rate, extremely high walk rate. Would a team like the Oakland A's turn down the opportunity to get a ranked pitching prospect with pedigree who's already logged and experienced AAA? That's the kind of people you can hide in a rotation on a bad team or even in the bullpen on a pretty decent team to kind of take control over those players. It's some of my thoughts, but I think overall, this is once again David Stearns proving I am now in control. And I've already been hearing behind the scenes, even through the offseason, I've been reporting on countless, I won't call it firings, but a lot of people have been let go throughout the year, even into the last 2 weeks. All kind of minor league department staff, coaching, scouts, they've been cleaning house even from a couple of weeks ago. So he's pretty much starting over. So part of that starting over, he's going to be adding new people of his own, including new minor leaguers and new 40-man guys.
Yeah, and that's definitely good to know. See, this is why I wanted to bring you on, because I'm no prospect guru. I read up on these guys. Occasionally, I try to watch games when I can, but again, like, it's kind of hard keeping up with the Mets and the minor league farm system at the same time. That situation did not apply to Eric Orzi, correct? In terms of the Rule 5 draft and just flipping him for an asset before he enters that, or not? Because I'm not aware of that.
I don't even remember if he was technically Rule 5, but it's one of those things. I don't even know how many options he had left. So
Sure.
Obviously, for a team like the Rays to pick him up, it's about control for all kinds of years. So I'm sure they have more years of control, MILB options, all that. So I think this was just pretty much clearing, a spot to get a 26-man guy and giving up a possible 40-man guy. Because again, they're going to need these spots because even again, talking with some sources in the Mets organization, they know they're going to have to make some trades and free agency because that's how many holes they have. Looking at this wonderful rotation, jokes aside, this rotation is winning 70 games. So they're going to have to do something. It's coming. I love the idea of Brandon Sproat, by the way. I think he's going to be in the rotation in 2025. And we're going to still have to knock on wood with the control. But you can't pencil a guy, just like with Sproat, like with Gilbert. If they both were to break camp on the opening day roster, something went wrong in the Mets organization based on how they're now making themselves out to be going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, and just this overarching conversation is also just reinforces the idea that this organization has done a complete 180 in terms of the talent that they are bringing up, because I know that maybe not so much Dom Hamill, but a guy like Mike Vasil sometime around this year, last year, was kind of in the conversation. Okay, the Mets are going to have a little bit of a down off season. They're not going to prioritize the pitching free agents that were out there besides Yamamoto. Could there be room for a guy like Mike Vasil in the rotation in 2024? And they backfilled it with guys like Manaya and Severino, and they went that route instead. And now we're talking about Mike Vasil, who's not even a consideration for the Mets to even try to protect from the Rule 5 draft. I mean, regardless if they get flipped or not for assets, et cetera, but it just speaks to the mindset in terms of the flexibility that the Mets now have in prioritizing, again, going back to what Cohen said, and I don't want to hold them to this comment, but potentially being a Dodgers type team of the East in terms of the farm talent that you can foster and inevitably bring up or use as trade pieces. Now we'll get to Brandon Sproat and we'll get to one of these other names on the list. But before we do that, we do have to talk about said trades that you just proposed. And again, by the way, the Mets 40-man roster at this very moment is around 34 players. So maybe 35 after that major league signing of the Red Sox reliever that they're bringing over. But anyways, 34 to 35, and obviously free agents and trades alike, you're going to have to hold those roster spots. So that also does factor into the decision, as Ernest just said. But let's talk about a highly controversial topic amongst this Mets fan base and the names that, and you already see it with Ernest here. Big prospect hugger that Ernest is. This makes him a little scared. This slide makes him a little scared. This is an external sample trade package that I discussed on my channel pertaining to a potential trade package of Garrett Crochet. And I do have a question here for you. I believe it was from Kendrick. What minor leaguer should definitely be no deal, talking about untouchables? And we will get into that. I would like to get into that in the following slides. I mean, I guess we can get into it here as well. But when you take a look at this trade package, this is per MLB.com and these rankings that you're seeing. Number 2 prospect in the Mets system, Jet Williams. Number 5, Mets ranked prospect outfielder Carson Bench. Number 10 ranked prospect who we are both a big fan of, and I also just dropped a video on my channel about, and Jonah Tong. I get that Garrett Crochet is 25 years old. I understand that he is now a starting pitcher, and you're going to get more out of him, presumably, if his injury past is beyond him. 146 innings pitched, 3.58 ERA. I know that he's electric, but how much is too much for a guy like Garrett Crochet in your mind?
Well, I have to be careful knowing who I am. So I can't always just say no, and turn down every prospect. But a guy like this, when healthy, it doesn't happen often. We say these things sometimes with certain players. Obviously, like a Soto, when someone hits free agency this young. For a guy like this to be this young and available with multiple years of team control, not just, the usual thing, the trade deadline or even the whole 1-year rental. For a guy like this with multiple years as a lefty arm, which is pretty unique of sorts still in the game of baseball at this point, he's a guy you have to try to get. So in general, I'm okay with understanding you're going to part with multiple top 10 prospects. Now, for me, only my opinion, some of the guys that I consider untouchable, which the term itself gets people angry, I really would prefer not to part with Jet Williams and Jonah Tong. And I have a younger guy, Jesus Baez, for many biased reasons. They're not allowed to trade him either. So, yeah, but Jet Williams and Jonah Tong, for different reasons, I just think the Mets organization has to hold on to those two guys. And then even Carson Bench, who's at least a Stearns guy of sorts at this point, maybe too early to kind of flip a kid like that. So that's just some of my thoughts, but I do understand and agree. I think they said the rumors were that the White Sox actually do want bats, not just always saying take the pitcher, because otherwise they would probably ask for Tong, ask for Sproat, and then ask for a hitter. If they want to go the middle infielder route, I want to keep Jet Williams. Does that mean that I'm willing to part with Acuna? Maybe. Maybe you fight me off the Jet one. You're going to take me off my own untouchable list, but Acuna's there. If you want to pay down on McNeil's contract, I don't know what kind of rebuild the White Sox really want to do here. Do they want to have a couple of years of McNeil paying him next to nothing if Cohen pays it off? It won't be that simple. They're going to want prospects, but that's just some of my thoughts. Again, can I part with Gilbert? Okay. Acuna, I think you can talk me out of some of my beloved top 10 guys to get a guy like Crochet because they're not going to come around this often like this.
Yeah, and especially relating to the last slide that we just went over and the outlook, there's going to need to be moves that are made. And I get it. You can go down the free agent route, but the free agent market for starting pitchers is a little bit top heavy to me. And so, there is a realistic, there has to be one trade in my mind. Of course, I could be wrong and there could be no trades for any starting pitcher for the Mets. But for me, I think the Mets are really in line this offseason more than ever for a trade for a starting pitcher, whether it's Garrett Crochet or whether it's a name that we're not even talking about right now. Would you be inclined to take a guy like Jet Williams off, which again, I don't think it's that simple because there has to be other people that are involved in this package. But would you rather sell the White Sox on building their future with a guy like Ronnie Mauricio? Yes or no?
The health situation, it's probably deciding, do they both say no or do both of them want to say yes? It's kind of a weird situation because of his health situation. Again, it's even leggish. It's not like a guy who's going to be in all kind of trouble coming back, but he's such a enigma at this point because you feel like he's been around forever, which kind of is for me because I've known since he was a teenager. But that power is just, what if he ends up, because you see how like an Ahmed Rosario, he's quietly, very quietly been like a 10-year Major League Baseball player who hits for average. He still doesn't really walk. So a guy like Mauricio, if he turns into a newer age Ahmed Rosario, but with 25 plus home runs, imagine these past 2 years of Rosario, but with 25 home runs. That's going to get some eyes going. So if he can be that type of guy, you almost want to keep him, and maybe the White Sox would take a flyer on him. We all know the situation of Pete Crow Armstrong when he was injured and the team took him, but that was in a rental for Baez back in the day. So with a team like the White Sox who may ask for 3 or 4 players, it's probably a great idea to have Ronnie Mauricio thrown in and just blame the injury for giving him no value. That would seem like, now would I want to get rid of him? Now I'm in a tough spot and I have to give an answer. I keep changing my mind every year based on how things go. I had Mark Vientos third behind Beatty, Mauricio, Vientos. Now all of a sudden it's Vientos, Mauricio, Beatty. So could we offer like Acuna and Beatty and then a top pitching prospect? Would that be something that they'd be interested in? Would they be yelling at me like, Dove, you're just picking the guys who don't have high enough value? Because that sounds like a homer kind of comment. But Mauricio just sounds like that guy. What if he becomes another 30-homer bat? What if he basically becomes the switch hitting-ish version of Mark Vientos? What if he magically is hitting over 250? Forget the walks. He's not going to walk. So, but if he hits 20, 30 home runs with Vientos, I don't know where the heck he's playing in the lineup, but can he handle the outfield? Because if Beatty's going to try it, try Mauricio again. That experiment was way too short. Looked awful for Mauricio. You may want to try it again in Syracuse, but it would be fascinating to see even what they want to do with this guy who should have already been on the 26-man like a Vientos this whole year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, there's a lot of what ifs in terms of the prospect, like any prospect in general, when you're talking prospects. I know this is your bread and butter, but for people who pay attention to the Mets and, want to fill out this rotation in an appropriate manner and build the best starting rotation as possible, there's a lot of people who are like, you got to give to get, especially when you have a team like the Red Sox who have 4 or 5 top 50 prospects in the entirety of the MLB pipeline, also potentially making a bid for Garrett Crochet. So, even with how strong of an offer this looks, I mean, if the Red Sox really want to go all in on a guy like Garrett Crochet, we could be talking about an offer that might not even be enough, as crazy as it is, if there's a potential bidding war. And I completely agree with you. For me, at this point, if Ronnie Mauricio is prioritized, which I think he should be, but again, on the flip side, if the Mets choose to prioritize Garrett Crochet above all else and they let a guy like Ronnie Mauricio go, I can live with it because in the trade package that I had put up for Garrett Crochet, Ronnie Mauricio's name was in there. I understand what the projections are with Ronnie Mauricio. We saw a sliver of that in the 26-game sample size that we saw out of him in the lost 2023 season. But at the end of the day, we also have to be realistic in terms of his position. What happens with Pete Alonso? Does Mark Vientos stay at third base? Can one of them eventually be a full-time DH? Which I think the answer could be yes for both of them. I know that people don't want to do that and limit these young players to that. But again, at the end of the day, if we're talking about keeping prospects in the organization and trying to find a spot for them within the 9 spots that you have allotted, someone's going to have to DH. And I think that the defensive capabilities sort of just align up to that. Anyways, that's a great conversation, and we'll continue to monitor the Garrett Crochet sweepstakes. Again, this is not the only time that we're going to mention Garrett Crochet this offseason. As things start to heat up in the trade market, we are going to no doubt be talking about this guy on the channel. Ernest will be talking about the prospects and the prospect viewpoint of a potential Garrett Crochet trade. But in terms of that, dreaded, untouchable, quote unquote, prospect narrative or saying that people are throwing out there, I have my untouchables. You've got your untouchables. I think we agree on these first 2 untouchables that we're going to be taking a look at. And then maybe we'll differ on the third one that we've kind of stated. You've already hinted at yours, but this exactly is a mirror image of mine and mimics mine. Brandon Sproat. Let's talk about Brandon Sproat and the sort of story and just come up that he has had in a tremendous all-encompassing 2024 campaign. A lot of people forget, and honestly, before we went live, I forgot that this was a guy that got drafted by the Mets twice while being at the University of Florida. Obviously, he chose to not sign with the Mets after they drafted him in the 3rd round in 2022, went back to Florida for his senior year, and inevitably got drafted by the New York Mets again, this time, I believe, 56 overall in the 2nd round, and he signed. And now, per MLB.com, he is the Mets' #1 ranked prospect. Absolutely electric. You see here the stats on the right-hand side of your screen. You see the total value at the top in green. He played in high A ball, he played in double A ball, and he made an appearance briefly in 28 innings where he kind of struggled a little bit in triple A. But again, the stuff is there. Electric fastball between 95 to 97, can touch 100, up to 100 on the fastball, isn't going to sit there. That's he kind of rears back. I hear he has an electric slider that he's trying to gain control of, but his main secondary pitch is a pretty efficient changeup that can get some swing and miss. Why is he untouchable in your mind, and where do you see him sliding in and kind of expanding on that point of potentially appearing for the New York Mets in 2025?
Well, he became the guy. It's like the immediate 2.0 version of another younger guy. He became like the 2.0 of Christian Scott, who just absolutely out of nowhere, we knew he was good. There were ifs on things. With Christian Scott, the if was he just wasn't able to stay on the field for multiple years. So you didn't really know what was going on. Maybe he had a reliever-ish kind of profile from college. He was starting in the pros, kept missing time. And then, boom, he got healthy. He just dominated. Now, with a guy like Brandon Sproat, kind of the same thing, even in college at Florida, the command. So even in looking on the screen, like, A-ball was what you were worried about, worst case scenario. And then all of a sudden in Binghamton, that walk rate, he's already in the rotation with that kind of walk rate with his stuff. AAA, again, Dove can use random excuses. The ball's different feel. AAA batters, you get the veteran hitters. Maybe there's a lot going on, but the thing about Brandon Sproat, like you always say, the stereotype, you can't teach 98 to 100. So when you have a starting pitcher who can go 98 to 100 with the right command, and in talking with the coaching staff this year, I always wanted to ask about Brandon Sproat. And they said the work ethic is there. So it's one of those guys, he has the work ethic and he wants to get better. Regardless of his age, college guy, college senior, hard work ethic, wants to be there. He's putting it all together. If the coaches love him, I love him. Because I'm a prospect hugger, but when I have literal intel from inside the organization saying behind the scenes, privately, no longer private, we love him. So when you tell me that, that's another reason why I'm going to hype guys like this. But again, 98 to 100 is good too.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll take that all day long. You get the inside information here for my guy, Ernest. if you all are enjoying this content, I hope you all are. This is great insight for me in terms of expanding my knowledge on these Mets prospects. I appreciate Ernest's time. Again, continue. We will get to the offensive side of things with these prospects. I have some questions starred. Don't you worry. But again, where else are you going to get inside information like this other than the True Mets Talk podcast? So again, make sure you check out Ernest. Link in the description down below. Subscribe to his channel. Subscribe to my channel if you are new here watching on X or over on YouTube. Drop those comments. And again, we just love talking Mets baseball, and that's why we're here in the first place. Is my question for you is pertaining to Brandon Sproat, and I know the answer is going to be no, but I want to ask just to do my due diligence. Is there, if they find a perfect method to backfill this rotation efficiently and their outlook in terms of, bringing Brandon Sproat up changes to maybe more so of a mid-season, late season kind of add-on, is there any world they would be like, let's put him in the bullpen? Any world?
See, a guy like that, there's so much upside. I would have thought now in the last recent months, I've started to name a lot of top prospects thinking in terms of pen arms to try to transition these guys. Like a Jose Butto, all of a sudden, he's like the god of bullpen until maybe some things withered down at the end of sorts. But again, as a guy, like, can he pitch back to back? That's the issue with when you're trying to transition in the moment. A guy like Brandon Sproat is so talented. Now, I think it wasn't even Crochet or some other guys back in the day with such highly regarded guys in season. Maybe, you know what, maybe for an organization that's all in every year and they get past the All-Star break and they're dominating, if a guy like Brandon Sproat and they're somewhat healthy enough and you want to have a Brandon Sproat throwing 100 for 1 or 2 innings but doing the Butto but at 100, you may actually go that route because especially for a senior sign, a guy that's already been throwing 100 innings since college anyway, throws 100 innings in college, could throw 100 innings in pro ball. He might be a guy you don't lose development if you actually throw him into the pen just temporarily if everyone else is healthy. That's actually a very interesting option, even a trade deadline kind of trump card or like playing chess for Stearns. If they're doing all right, and we all know that the big teams have to be buyers, but if he has that in his pocket, maybe he can not have to go after certain things and lose more prospects if there's enough health in the pitching. So, yeah, with health, it would be an interesting 99-mile-an-hour Butto. But if anything else is going up or down, he definitely needs to eat those innings all season long because I would still probably see him inevitably making a major league debut as a starter.
Yeah, that's great insight as well. And there's a lot of, options in terms of moving starters in terms of the prospect realm over to the bullpen. There's a couple of other names that could be an option for. But again, I would have to think that the Mets in a best case scenario would try to get away from that and try to not have to do that. But I would take 99, 100 out of the pen for 2 innings. Absolutely 100%. And there's also just like a mixed variation of, how many young guys can you really rely on in a championship contending season? That's also going to be the question in terms of, that David Stearns has to answer, because I don't get paid those kind of big bucks, but that would be kind of an interesting sell to me as well in relation to that. This next guy that we're going to talk about, I recently also, I talk about a lot of these guys. So if I keep saying that I'm dropping these videos about these guys, it's, it's on the channel. It's public information. You got my thoughts and opinions. But, this is number 2 on both of our untouchable lists here, as in, in terms of prospects. And as far as prospects go, Jonah Tong, the guy who seemingly came out of nowhere, at least for myself and a lot of other Mets fans, when he kind of saw what his 2024 campaign was. You see the differences in terms of the numbers, very short sample size in 2023, but in 2024, he took off 100+ innings across 3 different levels. The strikeout per 9 rate is absolutely insane. The walks have been an issue for him, but I've been listening to some of the interviews that he's been doing, talking about, who he's been working with, what he's been working on in terms of the mechanics and the mindset, and what his approach is to pitching. this kid is special. This kid is special. He was a 7th round pick in 2022, had no college commitment after his senior year. His senior season year of baseball was concluded in high school. I mean, he's a fast riser in this farm system. So where do you kind of project him to be at, especially when taking a look at all these trade packages and all these baseball media outlets, including his name on some of these trade packages?
Well, I'm sure everyone's going to want him. That's for sure. That's why he's on my untouchable list. I think the ceiling is just way too high to give up on right now. We understand how prospects are, especially arms, regardless of their pedigree. But a guy like I've been hearing about Jonah Tong for a very long time. I was hearing about him from talking with some Mets staff, even when he was doing bullpens, throwing 97, when he was delayed in actually making his kind of debut again. He disappeared for like a year and a half plus after the draft. And I started hearing about him looming. I'm like, is Jonah Tong exist? They were like, he's doing bullpen sessions, throwing 97. He's electric. And they were honest. They were like, he doesn't know where it's going yet. So he was just kind of like getting it going again, getting healthy. So I've known about him since like the second year after the draft. Again, the coaches say that he has an absolutely insane work ethic. So he has that Francisco Alvarez work ethic. So we got that going on. He's an extremely nice person. Even the coaches says he's like an 80 grade human being, which again, it's like sounds cliche, but when you're that hardworking and you're a really kind person and you're coachable, those are the 3 kind of cliches that I was told about. But then when you look at the numbers, they're absolutely ridiculous. And when I was like messaging with some of the staff and I was like, what is going on? They're like, Jonah Tong, it is what it is. That's what he does. This is what we see in him when he has the command. Now, again, he's not comparable to Dom Hamill, but like in the Hamill-esque situation, it's about consistency. How consistent is he going to have that command now going forward? As he gets absolutely ridiculously dominating, and he had to eat these innings because he's gone from like 0 innings to like 7 innings to like 100. That's a huge leap. So for him to even get through that season is amazing. Even pitching in Double-A, one of his higher K rates, even at Double-A at the end for 9 innings for a guy who's absolutely gassed, barely pitching pro ball. That's why I'm super excited about him. His curveball is ridiculous. So, and I think at his best, the velocity wasn't as high, I believe, in 2024. I started asking staff about that. They're like, well, we think it's coming back. So what I mean is they're probably thinking it still could be 95 to 97 plus at full strength. So if you have a guy that's a little bit less than Sproat, but just call it 95 plus with a 12-6 curveball, and he's got some of the other mechanics and the other pitches that he's developing, I can't call him a number 1 starter because it's easy to overhype a guy. But if you call him an SP2, SP3, that's something every organization needs. And I think he has that capability, even to like that could be the ceiling of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous in terms of when I was doing my research and putting up these slides here. I was just like, you talk about the movement too, especially on his fastball in the induced vertical break category. You just mentioned the 12-6 curveball. His arm angle also is very interesting, more so over the top. And this guy is not really a big guy. Correct me if I'm wrong. 6'1", about 180, something of that nature. Yeah, and it just makes it. He's deceptive too for me, especially with how well he hides the ball and just him coming over the top like that. I don't know. This guy, it's always hard for me to assess the trajectory of some of these prospects. And there is something to say for, a guy like, I'm not going to go that far in terms of saying that is applicable to Brandon Sproat. And we don't really have the delineations in terms of the reasoning why, Double-A ball is more of a benchmark in terms of pro success than Triple-A ball is. But at the same time, it's hard not to be excited for these pitching prospects that we have come up through the pipeline. And I guess for you, the question is two questions, one for me, one from Darren. Let's get to Darren's first. What about Tidwell and McClain as bullpen options? And then I'll circle back around with a Jonah Tong question for you.
Yeah, as far as Nolan McClain, again, talking with some of the same staff, The one quote that I even did online on social media, because I was hearing about it from staff. Staff said, what is going on with McLean? Is he for real? He said, buy stock in McLean. That's literally the quote. So they believe that McLean is the real deal as a pitcher. Again, I'm willing to disclose very early on, talking with multiple people in the Mets organization, they were seeing pitcher only from way before that it kind of went to that point. But they wanted to give him a shot. They respected him. He's a good person. He's a good athlete. They were pretty much seeing it was going to be pitcher only. To this day, and even if I ask some of my same sources, I don't think they're 100% challenging me as a starting pitcher. So if you were to quote me right now, make me give an answer, I still like the idea of Nolan McLean as a pen arm. I'm not saying that's how he's going to project. I'm not saying that the staff want him to be a pen arm. I do believe it's still an extremely high possibility. Now, again, he made so many advancements, especially when he went pitcher only, because he was kind of tiring. And, not everyone can be Ohtani. It's kind of hard to believe, right? But I do like the idea of Nolan McLean as a pen arm, because that was kind of the thought process from my understanding talking to the organization. Now for Tidwell, obviously, now we're getting into the maybe more highly regarded version of Dom Hamill and Mike Vassell. Like, hey, in your groupings, like I did with Vientos, Beatty, Mauricio, I continue to consistently have Tidwell at the top for those three before Christian Scott zoomed, before Tong and Sproat did their thing. These guys were the top 10 guys before they kind of fell off. So I had Tidwell so high. And I honestly like the idea, again, make him another version of Abuto. But by the way, again, Tidwell as a full-time pen arm can probably be 99, 98. He could probably be that guy as well out of the pen. I don't know if that would be something they want to explore. I kept hitting up my sources in the Mets like, it's time to transition, guys. And they gave the political answer like, eventually some guys are going to have to transition over. That's the game of baseball. So that wasn't really a big enough, detailed enough disclosure of anything. So I'm still just kind of speculating. But I do kind of feel, even through the organization, I'm thinking McLean, yes. Tidwell, the jury can still technically be out. And I would love to see him again in the AAA Syracuse Mets rotation come 2025 with Sproat and see how it goes.
Yeah, there you have it. I mean, it's inevitable, right? With these prospects and with the plethora of prospects that are now coming up through the ranks, and you have your groupings, but it's inevitable that some of these guys are going to be transitioned into bullpen arms, and that's just the nature of the business at this point. My question for you in terms of Jonah Tong, in terms of being a little bit wary of giving him up for a guy like Garrett Crochet or whoever else it is that is asking for a guy like Jonah Tong. Is there an if or and option in terms of where you see Christian Scott? Would you, if there is, let me rephrase this. I'm trying to find the right words to phrase this. If there's a situation where a team is like, we will take Jonah Tong, for example, or Christian Scott, knowing that Christian Scott's not going to be pitching in 2025, but will come back electric in 2026, presumably, with how well he was doing coming up through the ranks. What would you like? Who would you prioritize? I know this is a very on-the-spot question. I know this is kind of difficult, especially with the differences in situations, but is there a priority there, or is it just simply apples and oranges in terms of comparing these two guys in the trade talks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the health thing, again, now I'm going back to the PCA thing with Pete Crow Armstrong. Like, hey, what kind of value can we get for a guy who's injured and we'll get less for him? So Scott would be the kind of guy you got to package with multiple prospects to get someone. I would be so scared of losing him. I would pair Christian Scott in with Mauricio. Like, please don't do anything right now, because those two just are both enigmas at this point. And I started communicating with one of who's no longer a scout in the Mets organization, one of the higher ups in the scouting department. They were so excited about Christian Scott. And I was literally kind of talking and communicating. It was like, dude, he just hit 98. And they're like, are you serious? We've been hoping for this. He didn't see one of those starts where he was hitting 97, 98 in the minors. And they knew, like, oh, my God, if he becomes what we think he is, just enjoy him, Ernest, because he's going to be electric. So him and Mauricio, please don't, you can't go anywhere. And don't do that kind of trade. Because that's another guy, again, literal employees of the Mets that were like, dude, if he's back to what we think back is, he's a frontline guy. So it would be so rough to trade either one at this point. But again, with Scott, you're trading him with 2 or 3 other guys. So now you're really egging it on. Tong is probably the guy who literally headlines the trade. I don't even think he would probably need more than Tong to get Crochet. I understand it as a prospect hugger. I get it. But Christian Scott, now you're losing probably 4 people to get a player like Crochet just because he's injured.
Sure. And that's the differences in the values there. I kind of get what you're saying in that aspect 100%. So yeah, this is the pitching side of things. And we're kind of wrapping up this sort of pitching talk by talking about obviously the rotation. We talked about that as well. We talked about Brad Sproat, talked about Jonah Tong, untouchable versus not, again, is a word that is loosely thrown out there because I know in your mind and your line of business, you think about prospects in a little bit of a different way. But again, I'm going to go back to the point of giving to get and just having limited spots on the major league roster, 26-man roster at the end of the day. And, you got to look at it from both sides of the fence. I know a lot of people in this stream right now are looking about it from the other side of the fence, but this is why I have you on. This is why I have you on, Ernest. We want to know about the prospects. We want to know what the Mets are working with and what talent we can see come up. And again, I want to take a little bit of a night to rest aside the Juan Soto talks. We have plenty of offseason to talk about Juan Soto. But if you're here, please do hit those thumbs up buttons. It means a lot. Don't only subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit those thumbs up buttons. Make sure to check out Ernest's work. All of that can be found in the description down below. But inevitably, you're going to see Juan Soto's name here at some point in this stream. I put together a little bit of a roster projection because, anytime we could go the pitching route and I could have put up a roster or a lineup projection for 2025 with the internal names that we have on here right now, which would have included a bunch of different prospects. But for me, this is kind of how it's looking right now. And yes, the ball game changes because you're going to have Jose Siri manning one of these positions, whether it's a starter at center field or whether it's coming off the bench. And the ball game changes today with that trade. But, where do you look at this lineup and some of the names that you see here on the bench in terms of Luis Angel Acuna versus Drew Gilbert? I think with the Jose Siri trade, I almost said signing, pardon me. Drew Gilbert's spot is in jeopardy. It's in jeopardy. And the Mets are still going to have to try to figure out what they're going to do with that last bench spot as of right now, because, I don't think they're going to carry 5 or 6 outfielders on any given roster if you're factoring in Juan Soto as another outfielder. But I think it's safe to assume that Luis Angel Acuna's spot, with what he did in the very limited sample size, at the minimum with his defensive capabilities, is pretty secured, you would say?
There's so much I'm trying to figure out, what would be the best scenario. Even looking at your bench, to be honest, again, the Mets organization being what they want to be, I'm thinking Gilbert and Acuna are in Syracuse. That would be the best case scenario for the Mets, which is no knock on either one. I think they're both major league players, and they will play. Just like the pitchers, the inevitable is going to happen both with the arms and with certain bats. Drew Gilbert, again, Marte is kind of who Marte is. We may not know throughout the whole season how Marte is going to hold up. So even can Marte be the full-time DH, maybe? Can he spend a lot of time there? One way or another, Gilbert can be, the best case prospect hugger scenario would be Gilbert slips in eventually long-term for Marte. I just think that the Mets are going to go veteran to go along with Torrance and another veteran. I think it's going to be 4 multi-year major league veteran players on the bench. And then McNeil. What are we doing? What do we have? Do we have – I I love McNeil. I literally interviewed McNeil way back in the day when he was in the minor leagues. So obviously I have a bias in favor of Jeff McNeil, but are both he and Marte both going to break camp with the Mets? I kind of still almost think no. For no reason, no real intel. No one's telling me anything. When I ask the higher ups for the real information, it's not happening. So I got to get to the smaller stuff and stay in my lane, which is what I've been doing. The reason why I give so much minor league information is because that's the information they're willing to disclose. Once in a blue moon, I do get some information that I'm not allowed to share. But unless someone tells me, I'm wondering if they're not both going to be there. My own opinion, speculation. I just think, if there's room to be made, I don't know if Acuna is going to really be able to win anything. We can't go enough off the sample size of September call-up when he was like the god for like a week or two and then quietly slowed down and then quietly never played again. It doesn't mean that's how he's going to be judged, because just because a rookie didn't play in the playoffs has no thing that he's not going to be awesome in 2025. But I just don't think him and Gilbert are going to be enjoying themselves in Syracuse with some of our top pitchers.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of question marks, and I think that the conversations do have to start with, Starling Marte and Jeff McNeil. I think that everything remaining consistent, maybe they do both break camp with the lack of options. But again, a lot of people talk about retaining them because we can't find trade partners. But with the money that they're making, I mean, are we sure they're also just not buyout candidates at the end of the day with the way that Steve Cohen is running this ship? I mean, I wouldn't put it past this organization to do that if there becomes a necessity to clear a roster spot. And a lot of people talk about Starling Marte being the DH, and that very well could happen in terms of getting him off of his legs, being older, a lot of injury history, and not having him play the field anymore, which he has, where he has severely regressed in. But at the end of the day, start an everyday DH with the lack of power now that Starling Marte has. I mean, how many months did he go without actually hitting home run? Telling me, with Starling Marte as almost an everyday DH is not something I really want to pursue. But again, if they don't find a trade partner, they don't buy out the contract, they're forced to do that because they want to, play Juan Soto in right field. If they inevitably get the guy over Starling Marte, then that could be an option. So again, there's so many what ifs. There's so many other situations that actually have to play out, and we will await to see what the decision is on guys like Drew Gilbert and Luis Angel Acuna. Speaking of, as Kendrick is pointing out here with the question, and the other name highlighted in yellow, and Pete Alonso, any good first baseman we should be looking at within the next year or so in the pipeline?
I mean, it's such an interesting position. It's one of those things where they always say the stereotype or the cliche is, it's one of those ones you never really worry about. It just kind of happens, going up the levels. It's kind of like where you end up, even guys that are just playing other positions. And actually, every year I feel like there's been a different guy. If you were to put a top 5 first baseman prospects list, I think it's changed every single year. You could even going into 2024, he was a utility player, but even like a Luke Ritter, who, by the way, also obviously officially is not being Rule 5 protected, by the way. He's a guy who's like a hit or miss, literally bat, who can get you probably 25 plus home runs in any given season if he played a full season. The question marks are the K rates for Luke Ritter, if you wanted to consider him a first baseman. But other than that, the only real thing at this point, a true top prospect first baseman would be, if you force him there, would be Ryan Clifford. He's the guy we got for Verlander along with Gilbert. Clifford, they keep playing him in the outfield. And again, he's there. Is he like, it's been interesting. There's some concerns with his outfield performance. But again, he's so young, so he's been playing that the stats haven't been there. But he is a power bat. So, and it hasn't even been showing. He hasn't blossomed yet, and he's young. And I know he's been on a lot of top 100 prospect lists. So he's really the guy. But if you were to say we can let Pete go because of Ryan Clifford, some people were trying to say that last year, and that is not happening because my projections or whatever, he's not seeing Citi Field anyway in 2025. I don't care what he does. He's not seeing it. So it's a future kind of situation with him at first base. Otherwise, there's really no other guys. There's been so many guys over the years and guys who are really good. JT Schwartz. I love JT Schwartz. I think he's kind of those bat-to-ball skill guys. He's like my version, not as good defensively, but he's like my version of Dom Smith, where absolute best case scenario, I saw JT Schwartz as a 275 and up batting average kind of guy with 12 to 16 home runs a year, which isn't super exciting, but that's how I kind of saw him. Mauricio. Well, I wish Mauricio could play first base, by the way. Ronnie Mauricio at first base could solve a lot of problems. But I do think that they need to keep him around. I don't care what it is. I don't know if left field or right field can work for Ronnie Mauricio. He'd be a super old, big old, tall second baseman, but isn't that guy on the Reds extremely tall looking? And shortstop. So it could be done. But again, you've got Jet Williams, you've got Acuna, you've got Mauricio, you got Beatty. You can't make everyone a utility player on the Mets. And now you're actually killing their value, which I've said this on social media. Once you start killing the value, you're going to have the Dom Smith situation. You're going to have the JD Davis situation where you're keeping these guys just long enough to where absolutely nobody else wants them, and then they just walk. And you can't even trade them. You can't start them. You can't even have them on the 26-man. So those are the concerns too. Like, when is enough enough? Even with the Manil situation, when do guys like Acuna or Jet just get supplanted and get it over with? Because if not, the longer you wait, who struggles, who starts to get a high K rate, who doesn't pan out at all of a sudden, it's going to get little predicaments, which is what happens obviously in the minor league world and drives people like me crazy.
Absolutely, it does. And moving past this onto the actual debate of the third untouchable, because again, this is just a stepping stone conversation of, this is going to be pretty hard. I'm assuming there's going to be a long roundabout answer, but we are expecting an answer on here, Ernest. So we're going to make you have to give us an answer on this debate right here, because it's a debate that I've been getting into so many times. And again, when you take a look at one of the players making that transition, talk about guys playing out of position, their natural positions, one of these guys offensively, now that we're talking offense here on this stream, is making his way to the outfield. He also just recently got hurt, unfortunately, but I think that you can confirm that he's good. He's expected to be good, playing out in the Arizona Fall League. Actually, both of these guys are playing in the Arizona Fall League, and these are the number 2 and number 3 prospects in the Mets system, according to MLB.com, Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert. The reason why this is a debate is that, you have and it goes back to the Garrett Crochet trade of, a lot of mock trades have Jet Williams' name in it. A lot of people say that he's untouchable. A lot of people might even have Jet Williams as the number 1 prospect in the Mets farm system still. But again, per MLB.com, they have Brandon Sproat in that position. But, if there was a way, and if you prefer a guy like Jet Williams to still go ahead and pursue that trade, the immediate guy thereafter would probably just headline the trade of, being Drew Gilbert. Now, just to caveat this, both of these guys were injured at some point and lost a lot of amount of games in 2024 in their 2024 campaigns. I included, to make it as even as possible, both the numbers and averages from Williams in AA and AAA in 2024, and just strictly Gilbert's AAA numbers in comparison. I believe Drew Gilbert started off in AAA to begin his season. So that only makes sense. But again, you take a look at 56 games for Drew Gilbert versus 28 games of Jet Williams. Not a lot of sample size. The numbers here, Jet Williams got pretty much saved in terms of these numbers holding true with high value because he absolutely killed it in 6 games at the AAA level when he got back from that wrist injury, if I'm not mistaken. The AA numbers, again, which if you want to point out as a concerning factor between the delineation of AA talent versus AAA talent, Jet Williams hasn't really succeeded in my estimation at the AA level. So I'm curious to get your answer, not only on which of these two guys you prefer in terms of making untouchable, which I think the answer is Jet Williams, but provide some reasonings there. My answer is Drew Gilbert. I've said that all along. I do have some concerns with the way that Jet Williams' power is going to translate at the major league level over a guy like Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert providing 10 home runs in 56 games. Jet Williams, none. And I think that he has 2 home runs in the Arizona Fall League compared to Drew Gilbert's 4. But again, the power is the concern for me to prioritize Drew Gilbert, but also Drew Gilbert's natural position is outfield. You know, he can play center field, and the ball game again changes with Jose Siri in the actual organization. But Jet Williams, how has that transition looked like from the infield to the outfield? And while you are talking, I got to get some more water, so I'll be right back. Hold it down for me.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I can hear what you're saying. Now I'm ready to debate you a little bit on this. Drew Gilbert definitely gets the nod when it comes to defense, for sure. Regardless, infield, outfield for Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert is the better fielder overall. And the power. I would say Drew Gilbert is the guy with the power. Jet Williams is the guy with pop. You got to use the term pop for baseball for Jet Williams. I see the pop in Jet Williams. I see the power in Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert has the defense. Jet Williams has lightning speed and on-base percentage. But I just think that overall, head-to-head, toe-to-toe, I would take Jet Williams ranking above Drew Gilbert and keeping Jet Williams above Drew Gilbert as far as trade talk and trade packages. I just love the idea of Jet Williams. The speed is undeniable. And again, we can't just call him Jose Altuve just because of the height. That's going to be too lazy. It is what it is. But overall, I think Jet Williams, he's going to give you the on-base percentage. He's going to give you the speed. I see it as pop. I don't know what that means. Maybe 15-plus home runs. I have no idea. But if his hit tool can sustain and be there, he's like that kind of guy. If he gets you like almost a Brandon Nimmo on-base percentage, only he's going to like triple the stolen bases of Nimmo, that sounds pretty exciting to me. Now, I don't know if Jet Williams can be a 380 OBP guy. I don't know about all that, but 350 plus with his speed, if he can be the old school batting average, again, just using the plain one of like over 250, if he could be over 260, 270 with a 350 plus on base percentage, stealing 30 to 40 bases a year, batting either first or ninth, I just think that is a value and a ceiling. It's always about, I don't even like the term ceiling that much, but I kind of feel like Jet Williams and even Ryan Clifford have a higher ceiling than Drew Gilbert, which I'm understanding, and I'm able to respect the people who say things like that. The ceiling on Drew Gilbert, I think I mentioned it a few months back online. There's certain players, it might even be Vientos, Mauricio. I think Mauricio's younger than Drew Gilbert. So it's just one of those things where he's a minor leaguer, but there's guys who've been in the major leagues who are younger than him. And obviously, Francisco Alvarez is younger. So it doesn't mean he's not going to be great because he's already 24 going on 25. But I just see the ceiling, the speed, the on-base percentage. I just see different tools for the Mets roster and lineup construction to bat Jet Williams 1 or 9. But again, I can almost say the same thing about an Acuna, probably batting more ninth. He doesn't have the on-base percentage that I could really see to bat leadoff. But it's why I have to keep giving him the edge. And honestly, me personally, my own rankings, I would still technically have Jet Williams ranked number 1 in the Mets above Brandon Sproat.
Is there any concern for you? So like you said, 15 home runs at the major league level. And keep in mind, right? I mean, we're not only talking about center field at this point. Brandon Nimmo, who's coming off of a season where he struggled, plantar fasciitis. I mean, just injury concerns of his, in his career so far as well. there's a world where they, depending on what the DH, who the DH is, move him or platoon him at DH, that opens up a corner outfield spot. Who's better positioned? And if you're prioritizing Jet Williams in this conversation, can Jet Williams be an everyday major leaguer in the corner outfield spot?
I just think like short-term, long-term, if there's like a 10-plus day IL stint for a guy like Marte or Nimmo, I'm calling up Drew Gilbert over Jet Williams in that situation. Positionally, structurally, for the roster position with 10-plus days, that would be my go-to guy. Still Drew Gilbert for those kind of stints. But as far as overall, who to trade, who to keep, who to rank higher than the other, I'm still stuck on Jet Williams at the moment. He's earned it for me. This season doesn't even count anymore, but because they were injured most of it, so it's it is what it is. But I just think that hopefully they're both with the organization come camp. But if one had to go, my answer, who I'm willing to part with, especially if it was a Crochet. But depending on the rumors, I'm sure they would want Jet Williams anyway, even for the middle infielder spot, if that's part of the rumor for White Sox, regardless.
Yeah, and that's something that you brought up. That's a great point in terms of this conversation as well, as you're projecting out, the future years to come, now, past the position, past the transition of their position and past the offensive metrics in terms of who can provide more power is the age factor as well. And there is a little bit of discrepancy there, which is a great point by you. So there's the mini debate. We'll keep it light for now, but it's hard to argue in favor, in a major way, either way here to me. I do understand Jet Williams. By the way, is there any concern with his wrist surgery that he had? I guess I should ask that too, because that's not really an easy surgery to come back from, and especially from like gripping the bat in that perspective. Have you heard anything about that?
I mean, I wouldn't know about anything long-term, honestly. A lot of times we've seen it. We saw it with Conforto back in the day. We were hearing the rumors about Alonso. So for things like wrist or even those hamate bones, which are awful, those can ruin almost entire seasons, even when they're playing or not. But long-term, after that awful few months or season, I don't see any issues. Just as well with his ankle situation. I was able to talk with somebody in the Mets organization after he got pulled from that game, and they said, dude, he's fine. So, but I can't really proclaim everything perfect because my source is not a doctor. So I just went off that he's going to be okay. So I'm assuming as of today in November, the ankle's going to be fine for camp. And I don't know of anything regarding the wrist that would be anything more than this season, 2024.
Okay. Great. I just wanted to ask that because I remember that it was kind of a quick comeback, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of what his timeline was of getting back. And inevitably, like I said, skewing the stats and the numbers here compared to AA. I mean, he absolutely just killed it at the AAA level with the Syracuse Mets to end the season, over 1,000 OPS. So that's really all you need to know. And the on-base percentage you're always going to get with Jet Williams. That is undeniable, as Ernest has just mentioned. Two things before we move on here to a little bit more of a rapid fire session. Daniel's checking in onto the stream. Mendoza got robbed. Absolutely. Am I shocked? No, this is how it goes for members of the Mets organization. We know it all too well with Francisco Lindor and some of those individual awards that, he should be up for, but hasn't won, or even the all-star selections. I mean, this is a Mets thing. This is a common Mets thing around the baseball world. They get the disrespect. People think it's funny, but you know what? Who cares? Continue to win ball games. And if you build a World Series contender, Mendoza is going to get that spotlight. He's going to have to get that spotlight. And Pat Murphy did win it by a pretty large margin. And I believe Mike Schilt of the Padres even came in second, which is absolutely ridiculous over Carlos Mendoza, whatever. And by the way, also a guy that we just mentioned, happy birthday to Francisco Alvarez. Happy birthday to him as we talk about our starting catcher. What draft picks do you think have a shot starting their seasons in Brooklyn? Cleopatra is asking.
Oh, Brooklyn. Let me try to think who would start definitely in Brooklyn. I'm wondering, that guy that we love so much from the Tommy Pham trade, young Jeremy Rodriguez, I wonder how soon he's going to be in Brooklyn. probably got to start off maybe in St. Lucie some more. As far as Brooklyn day one at a camp, I would like to see another one of the trade guys from the deadline, Marco Vargas, the other kind of OBP guy who basically, like Jet Williams, lost like an entire season. So by the time he showed up in St. Lucie, he was trying to play his best, and he kept getting hurt, it seemed like, every other week. So I would like to see a top prospect of sorts like Marco Vargas be in Brooklyn. My guy, my hero, Jesus, exit Vilo Baez. I want to see a healthy Baez in Brooklyn. I don't know. Hopefully they'll push it. A guy like Boston Barrow, who really struggled because they pushed him really fast. David Stearns promotes guys within like seconds. I think he really wanted to test the prospects because he didn't oversee any of their drafting. I think he was pushing guys the entire season. So I would like to see Vargas, Jesus Baez. I love me some Boston Barrow. So I want to see Boston Barrow in Brooklyn. As far as the arms, too, now we got to get into the younger arms. I'd have to really think about who's going to maybe get left back, who's going to be called up. It's going to be interesting to see. The arms like a Jack Wenninger, I don't know if he probably should find his way to AA. We'll see if he's stuck in A-ball still. But I think there's going to be, right off the top, looking at even a guy like Carson Benj, I would think as a college guy, you think they want to rush him, but maybe Benj can at least spend a little bit more time in Brooklyn, at least out of camp. But I think maybe it'll be the year of the bats, at least in the first half in Brooklyn. But the pitching, I'm sure, who's going to do what? This Santucci guy, does he exist? I don't know. But he probably would start his pro career in, right in Brooklyn. So at least you'll have a high draft pick to be excited about too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for answering that. Again, always monitoring these prospects in terms of the promotions that the Mets are handing out, especially with where they're kind of placed, because that gives you a little bit of a benchmark of where they kind of, have as a starting point for them in terms of where they think they have progressed or regressed as a player within the organization. So rapid fire segment. We're just on here for about an hour 25. We got maybe about 5 more minutes with you all here. Appreciate everyone in the chat. Again, please, if you're watching this, hit those thumbs up on this stream and subscribe for more Mets offseason content. Rapid fire. You already said your guy, Jesus Baez, Mr. Exit Velo, hits the ball hard. You see the encompassing numbers here. Has played shortstop, but a lot of people think that he's going to be more of a second base or even third base type. And then also Carson Benj, recent draft pick by the New York Mets coming out of Oklahoma State, was a former two-way player up to like 96 with his fastball, so he threw gas. Underwent Tommy John surgery, I believe, in his 2022 season at Oklahoma State. Recently, did they kind of just make him a one-way player in terms of just strictly hitting, or is that still on the table for Carson Benj being a two-way?
Yeah, Benj should be 100% outfielder. That's it. He's a batter. He's going to hit. That's the plan. Nothing's going to change there.
Okay, good. And honestly, I think that makes the most sense because his good buddy, Nolan McLean, had the opposite happening to him. And, you take a look at the upside of these players, and Carson Benj has tremendous upside. You just hate to prolong or delay the process should there be any injuries on the opposite side of the ball. It's great that these guys are able to do both at a high level, especially with their former college teams. But in terms of, the most value added to the New York Mets, it just makes sense from that kind of developmental standpoint. You see here Carson Benj from the left side, gap-to-gap power, only appeared in 15 games in the Mets organization. We're going to be seeing plenty of him. I'm excited for Carson Benj. I think he's thought of, correct me if I'm wrong, as more of a corner outfielder, but has the capability to play center field if absolutely need be. And then your guy, Jesus Baez, give me a rapid fire segment on both of these guys and what you are looking forward to seeing from them in 2025.
I think both of these guys are Stearns guys. He wasn't part of the Jesus Baez signing and development, but he's a fan. So when Stearns likes Jesus Baez, I like him. That's what I know. So the organization loves Jesus Baez because of the metrics. They love the exit velo. They love the barrel rates. They love all the fancy terms that Ernest Dove has no idea on. But that's why when they're mentioning him by name, they know him. So, and he's only 19. So they're excited about him. And then Benj, again, when they started mentioning him from the draft, he's an exit velo guy. He's a hard contact guy. These seem to be the guys that the Mets organization want under Stearns. And I was hearing the rumblings now, and for a few months ago, it was like a battle of trying to get these bats. With all the bats up and down the system look like they're struggling. And it kind of sounds like there's a new philosophy because there's a new man in town. He's pushing his guys. He's pushing the prospects way up. He's promoting guys. Even Jesus Baez is getting promoted before his injury. So they're testing these guys, but these are Stearns guys. Hard-hitting, versatile utility guys who can play maybe other positions. I think Jesus Baez has a really good above-average glove. I think he has the arm for third base. He has the hand glove instincts, range to play short or second. So I think he could play all three long-term one way or another. I'm happy. If I had to pick one no matter what, maybe third and then second as an option because Lindor's not going anywhere. So if I were to dream of Jesus Baez in a Mets uniform, it's going to be hopefully somewhere between third and second, depending on our new Lord and Savior, Mark Vientos. And for Benj,
that's right.
Well, I think Benj is the guy that people would probably have above Gilbert and play instead of Gilbert long term because he's a Stearns guy and he fits the bill.
And maybe that also contributes to the trade talk of Drew Gilbert. I mean, I would not like to see it happen because I really do think that Drew Gilbert has tremendous upside. I think that his power is going to translate. He's a fiery guy out of the University of Tennessee. But if David Stearns brought in Carson Benj, it's for a reason. Maybe they make do with what they got for the next couple of years in the outfield. And maybe Carson Benj is the same high riser as a guy like Jonah Tong on the pitching side of things. And we see him in Queens sooner rather than later. But there's a lot of revolving, I should say, parts to this equation. And then two other guys a little bit under the radar, again, with how young they are, but also uniquely two catching prospects that you wanted to mention. How do they fit the equation of the Mets being 18 and 19 years old, respectively? Number 28 and number 23 ranked prospects in the Mets farm system, respectively, especially when you have a guy as young as Francisco Alvarez, presumably going to be your franchise catcher for however many years that's going to be going on. And he still also needs a contract extension, presumably, by the way. I know there's some rumblings about that. I know the Mets are going to hold off on that, and maybe it's a little bit smarter to hold off on that. But we'll see how that goes. But anyways, Giovanni Rodriguez and Diverson Gutierrez.
Yeah, what's funny is, like, here we have Francisco Alvarez. I want him to get an extension. And by the way, there's like 4 Mets catching prospects in their top 30 rankings. So it's like we have the most depth that I can think of in forever. I don't even know how many organizations have this many catchers in their top 30. Giovanni Rodriguez is my guy. I'm going to hype him up. I've been joking that he's going to be a top 3 prospect in 2 years. So obviously I'm not allowed to take that away. So in the next 2-ish years, Giovanni Rodriguez is going to be ranked one of the top 3 prospects in the Mets organization. So I don't know, book it, save it, get mad at me later, or thank me later. Daverson Gutierrez, what was it, Ali Sanchez? I was coming up with comps that have a version of a Mets flair to it. I don't know if Daverson Gutierrez may become a future backup, maybe catcher, but he started exceeding expectations. I thought he was defense first. And then all of a sudden, he started to get hot with a bat in 2024. So I think Rodriguez could be a two-way player. I think he's going to hit and have defense. Daverson Gutierrez started to kind of outplay even almost more than I was thinking, quickly, more with the bat, because I started to worry. I think both guys, I don't think either guy is going to have Francisco Alvarez home run power, which, by the way, sounds weird when the power seemed gone for like the end of the season last year. But thinking Francisco Alvarez is going to start hitting home runs again, I don't think either one of these guys are touching him home run total-wise. But I love the idea of Giovanni Rodriguez. I have to stick to it. Mets staff telling me that he was basically the top prospect on their board in the entire IFA class during that IFA class signing. They had him number 1, so that's why they think he's going to be amazing. They even gave some comps I won't even mention because they're so ridiculous, people are going to get mad at me. But that's how high they like him from the catcher standpoint. I also like Chris Suero, who's also a teenage catcher. I don't know if he's 20 yet. Chris Suero can catch and maybe play left field. Ronald Hernandez can catch. Maybe he could play first base, also from the Robertson trade. So there's Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez. But I just think guys are getting traded, I'm sure, because there's way too many catching prospects. I just think both of these guys on the screen can become major league players. Maybe one can be a backup. I don't know if Davidson Gutierrez is going to be a future Tomas Nido or Louis Torrens. I don't know if that's going to piss people off or get excited. The routes that I see so far, trying to be the most realistic that a prospect hugger can be, those are my thoughts on those guys.
I love it. I love it. This is a kind of almost a way too early look at both of these guys with their respective ages in terms of the impact that they can have at the major league level for the New York Mets. But it's always, good to at least get the insight. And that's going to wrap it up for us in terms of this stream. And I really hope that everyone enjoying this stream, or I hope everyone is enjoying this stream. We've got about 366 people in here across X and YouTube, which is absolutely phenomenal. I know you guys are here to hear and listen to more so Ernest rather than me, but again, I love the knowledge that I can gain from this in terms of, the up and coming guys to watch out for, and even some of the guys that are knocking on the door in terms of, the untouchable prospects and, getting that sort of perspective on how these guys can translate. As you just mentioned a few seconds ago, with the names and the plethora of names, because we went over a lot today. We went over a lot in this hour and a half. With the plethora of names and their upside capabilities and potential in terms of translating to the Major League Diamond, there is going to be trades. There's going to be trades. If you think that David Stearns isn't going to get a proven, solidified guy with the mindset of keeping one of these guys that is, 20, 19 years old right now, you're mistaken. Those moves are going to happen, and we understand that. But on the flip side of things, it's also curious to me, as is with any other organization. I think the most, comparable could be the Baltimore Orioles with how much youth they have over there, is how you mix in the youthful talent and coincide it alongside your core guys of Francisco Lindor, right? The guys that are in the primes of their career, perhaps a Pete Alonso if he gets back, and how that kind of all meshes together as one team, one unit on your way to a potential World Series appearance and hopefully a World Series win. As we all know, every team in this league is trying to accomplish, maybe outside of the A's, which again, they're showing some different signs of what their priorities really are. And it's a shame for that fan base, unfortunately, that they have to endure that. But again, thank you so much, Ernest. Final thoughts from you. If you'd like to say a couple pieces, maybe rehash where people can find you, and just final thoughts moving forward from anything that you got going on with your content and also just anything that we talked about today.
Yeah, again, if you different social media accounts, just look for Ernest Dove, even on YouTube, even social media. Also forget maxmets.blogspot.com. Also Sports Wire Radio, SPORTZ, wireradio.org. And again, obviously shout out to all the Mets minor leaguers out there. Hopefully I'll be getting an interview soon. Shout out Zach Thornton, AKA Thor. I'm looking for you, man. I'm looking for you. I'm going to be talking to you soon. Shout out again some of the prospects like Boston Barrow. I still love me some Mike Vassell, so hopefully he can stay, obviously, with the organization. Or hey, if he gets drafted, I'm happy for him. And, overall, just continue to look out for me. I'll be talking all things Mets throughout the off season, because there's never an off season. There's always going to be something going on. There's going to be the Rule 5. There's going to be winter meetings. There's going to be a whole bunch of trades where everyone's going to be staring at my social media account to watch me blow up and cry, because it makes some people a bit of enjoyment. But it's okay. If my sadness gives you a feeling of excitement, then I'm going to take it because you enjoy the day. But yeah, thank you for having me on the show again. I look forward to be a part of it again one time soon, so I can continue to talk all things Mets and obviously more importantly, the minor leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Second time on the show, on the channel, Ernest Dove. Thank you so much for your extended time. We'll definitely find a time for you to, get back on here. Hopefully you are buying a large case of tissues that you might have to use with this prospect talk and, what type of offseason is on the horizon for the Mets, and hopefully in terms of trading for MLB ready talent to make this run and push at the World Series. And, it's always sad to see these prospects go, if they inevitably do. You've been covering them for quite some time. But again, the Mets are going to have a very busy offseason. I hope everybody in the chat enjoyed the differing perspective of this stream, talking about this offseason through a prospect sort of lens. In contrast to we're going to sit here and talk about Ken Rosenthal and what he just said about the Mets being favored, but he can go elsewhere, right? I mean, that doesn't really provide much substance as much as this does. So this was fun. This was informative. This was productive above all else. I appreciate you all. As always, please, Mets fans, hit the thumbs up button on this stream. Check out Ernest if you want to see the websites and the YouTube channel where you can find Ernest and his work. It's in the description down below. Subscribe to my channel as well. I'll be with you all off season long. Yes, I'll talk Garrett Crochet again. Yes, I'll talk Juan Soto again. Yes, we'll do a couple more prospect spotlights just like we did for Jonah Tong. So for that, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday nights. Appreciate you, Ernest. It's your boy CP. That's Ernest Dove. Catch you all later. Peace.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notifications button and checking out all